fused into her skin.
Guys, in first part of video I will unveil secrets of Guantanamo Bay prison, and in last part of video I will tell you questions which are still unanswered and leave stigma on USA and its allied countries, why they killed tons of thousands innocent people in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan etc. just for one Osama bin Laden, and whether it was part of New World Order to occupy oil resources and air bases in these countries to control China, Iran, Turkey and Russia etc. In the shadow of the Caribbean sun, the naval base at Guantanamo Bay sits quietly. Its barbed wire and watchtowers are stark contrast to the tropical beauty surrounding it. Established in 1903 under a lease agreement with Cuba, the U.S. military presence in this corner of the island has evolved significantly over the decades. However, it is the dark chapter that began in the early 2000s that has defined Guantanamo for many. A chapter marked by questions of justice, human rights, and the complexities of global conflict. In the wake of the September 11, 2001 attacks, the world shifted. The U.S. government, in a bid to respond to a new era of terrorism, initiated a series of military operations abroad, particularly in Afghanistan, targeting members of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. In this turbulent atmosphere, the decision was made to transform the naval base into a detention facility for those suspected of terrorism. The first detainees arrived in January 2002, marking the beginning of a controversial and unprecedented chapter in American justice. Here's an overview of key aspects related to its operations. Notable detainees and legal circumstances. Notable detainees. Some of the most well-known individuals who have been detained at Guantanamo Bay include Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind of the September 11th attacks. Abu Zubaydah, a key figure in Al-Qaeda, captured in 2002. Mohammed al-Qahtani, alleged 20th hijacker of the September 11th attacks. Ramzi bin al-Shib, an alleged coordinator for the September 11th attacks. Detainee statistics. Total detainees. Over 780 individuals have been detained at Guantanamo Bay since its opening. Current population. As of 2024, around 30 detainees remain at the facility. Releases. Approximately 730 detainees have been released over the years. Some have been sent to other countries, while others have been resettled in the US or other locations. Death sentences. No detainees have been executed at Guantanamo Bay, but some have faced military commissions that could lead to capital punishment. The legal proceedings at Guantanamo have faced numerous delays and challenges. Control and jurisdiction. Control. Guantanamo Bay is under military control, specifically managed by the U.S. Department of Defense. It is not under the jurisdiction of the FBI or other domestic law enforcement agencies. Status. The facility remains open, although there have been discussions about its potential closure. Legal proceedings. Trial rights. Detainees at Guantanamo Bay have faced significant legal challenges regarding their rights. Many have been held without trial, and legal proceedings have often occurred under military commissions rather than in U.S. federal courts. Some detainees have been granted trials, while others have been subjected to prolonged detention without formal charges. Court availability. While there are military courts at Guantanamo for certain detainees, the rights of detainees to fair trials have been a matter of contention, with many arguing that they should be tried in U.S. civilian courts. Why Guantanamo? The decision to establish a prison in Cuba rather than on U.S. soil was driven by a complex interplay of legal, political, and strategic factors. By locating the facility outside the United States, the government sought to circumvent constitutional protections typically afforded to prisoners. This move allowed for the indefinite detention of individuals classified as enemy combatants, who could be held without trial and without the same legal rights as those accused of crimes within U.S. borders. The rationale was simple. In a time of war, extraordinary measures were necessary to protect national security. The influx of detainees began almost immediately, with the U.S. government capturing hundreds of individuals in military operations and in raids that often targeted suspected terrorists. Many of these individuals were handed over to American forces by local warlords or captured in battles, leading to a staggering number of detainees. At its peak, the population at Guantanamo reached over 700. A number that would draw scrutiny and outrage from human rights organizations and advocates of due process around the world. The types of individuals brought to Guantanamo varied widely. Some were captured on the battlefield, while others were apprehended based on flimsy evidence or even rumors. The prison became a catch-all for those suspected of having ties to terrorism, leading to allegations of wrongful detention and abuse. Critics argued that many detainees were innocent victims of political enmity or misplaced intelligence, a troubling reality that would haunt the facility for years. As of recent counts, the number of detainees still held at Guantanamo has dwindled to a fraction of its peak, with only a small number remaining in custody. Some detainees have been released or transferred to other countries after years of legal battles, but many have faced indefinite detention, often without ever having been tried. The military commissions set up to adjudicate the cases of some detainees have been plagued by delays and controversies, leading to questions about their effectiveness and fairness. A significant number of those who have faced trial were subjected to harsh interrogation techniques, leading to confessions that critics argue were coerced under duress. Over the years, various American presidents have grappled with the question of Guantanamo's future. President George W. Bush authorized the facility's creation, while President Obama made efforts to close it, citing the need to uphold American values and human rights. Yet, despite these intentions, the prison remains operational, illustrating the complexities of national security in a world where threats evolve and public opinion remains divided. As for the staff at Guantanamo, they are predominantly American military personnel, including guards, medical staff, and administration. These individuals undergo rigorous training to handle the unique challenges of working in a facility designed for the detention of high-profile terror suspects. The workforce includes not only those in uniform but also civilian contractors, legal experts, and medical personnel, all contributing to the daily operations of the prison. Guantanamo's security systems are robust, reflecting the high-stakes environment in which it operates. Surveillance cameras, armed guards, and stringent protocols govern the movement within the facility. The prison itself is divided into several camps, each designed for different categories of detainees based on security assessments and threat levels. The control of access to the prison is tightly managed. Only authorized personnel, including lawyers and select family members, can visit the detainees, and these visits are closely monitored. Accessing Guantanamo Bay is no simple task. The facility can only be reached by military transport, and civilian flights do not operate to the area. This isolation adds to the sense of remoteness surrounding the prison. For visitors allowed to meet detainees, strict regulations apply, and the emotional toll of these visits often weighs heavily on both the visitors and the detainees, who have been deprived of normal contact with the outside world for years. The daily life of a detainee at Guantanamo is defined by routine and restrictions. Meals, which have garnered criticism in the past for being inadequate, are now reported to include options that accommodate various dietary restrictions, including halal meals for Muslim detainees. Yet, reports of hunger strikes have emerged as detainees protest against their indefinite detention and treatment, leading to a complex interplay between their demands for dignity and the prison's security measures. The existence of Guantanamo has raised profound questions about justice and legality. Many detainees have been held without formal charges, leading to accusations that the facility operates outside the bounds of the law. The Supreme Court has ruled that detainees have the right to challenge their detention in federal court, yet the processes involved remain convoluted, with many still waiting for their cases to be heard. The fate of those detained at Guantanamo Bay continues to haunt the American conscience. Some detainees have been released without charges, while others remain in limbo, awaiting trials that may never come. The uncertainty surrounding their legal status underscores the moral quandaries posed by the prison's existence. Are these individuals terrorists, or victims of circumstance caught in a political crossfire? Among the notable detainees who have passed through Guantanamo's gates are individuals whose names have become synonymous with the debate over U.S. counterterrorism policies. Some have been identified as high-profile terrorists, while others have been wrongfully accused. Their lives forever altered by their detention. The impact of their stories reverberates far beyond the walls of the prison, raising critical questions about accountability, justice, and the implications of a legal system that allows for such indefinite detention without trial. In examining the role of Guantanamo Bay in the American justice system, one must confront the uncomfortable truth that the facility stands as a testament to the challenges of upholding the rule of law in a climate of fear. The legal standing for such a prison, where individuals can be held without trial or due process, raises alarms about civil liberties and the very foundations of justice. The narratives of those detained within its confines serve as a sobering reminder of the costs of national security measures that blur the lines between safety and freedom. The political machinations that allowed for the establishment of Guantanamo Bay were influenced by a complex web of factors, including the geopolitical landscape of the time. The Cuban government's willingness to permit the U.S. to operate the naval base stemmed from historical agreements made during a time of U.S. dominance in the region. This relationship has since been fraught with tension, particularly as the U.S. government's actions at Guantanamo have drawn ire from international human rights advocates. In the end, Guantanamo Bay serves as a microcosm of the broader issues facing the U.S. in its fight against terrorism. It challenges the balance between national security and human rights, forcing a reckoning with the ethical implications of detaining individuals without due process. As discussions about the future of the prison continue, the stories of those who have been held within its walls linger. Testimonies of resilience, injustice, and the ongoing struggle for dignity in the face of adversity. The legacy of Guantanamo Bay is not just about the individuals detained there, but also about the impact it has had on American society and its values. As debates rage on about the legality of such detention practices, the need for transparency and accountability remains critical. The narratives that emerge from Guantanamo remind us that justice is not merely a legal framework, but a moral imperative that must guide our actions, especially in the face of fear and uncertainty. With time, Guantanamo has evolved from a facility of detention to a symbol of the tensions between liberty and security. The world watches as the United States grapples with its legacy, striving to reconcile the principles it claims to uphold with the realities of its actions. The story of Guantanamo Bay is far from over, as it remains a potent reminder of the complexities and challenges inherent in seeking justice and security in a rapidly changing world. The events of September 11, 2001, and the resulting conflicts and controversies have indeed left many lingering questions and conspiracy theories. Here are some of the major unresolved questions and points of contention that continue to fuel debate. Unanswered questions and controversies. Osama bin Laden's death. Public disclosure of evidence. Why hasn't the US provided publicly accessible evidence of bin Laden's death, such as photographs or video footage? This decision, reportedly made to avoid inciting further violence, has fueled conspiracy theories about whether bin Laden was actually killed in the 2011 raid. Bin Laden's ties to the CIA. Bin Laden was involved in US-supported efforts during the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s. Some allege that he had ties to the CIA, but whether this relationship continued into his later life remains unclear. Officially, the US denies any long-standing association with bin Laden post-Soviet era. The absence of Jewish workers on 9/11. Conspiracy theory of absence. There's a persistent conspiracy theory suggesting that Jewish workers were absent from the World Trade Center on 9/11. However, there is no credible evidence supporting this claim. Jewish people, like others from diverse backgrounds, were among the casualties. Despite debunking efforts, the myth has remained influential due to mistrust surrounding the incident. U.S. government's foreknowledge. Possibility of pre-planning or inside knowledge. Some believe that U.S. government officials including President George W. Bush, had foreknowledge of the attacks and allowed them to happen to justify subsequent military actions. However, no solid evidence has been found to support the idea that the government orchestrated or facilitated the attacks. The Bush administration did indeed receive intelligence warnings, but critics argue they were either ignored or not acted upon with urgency. Failures of U.S. intelligence and security on 9/11. Radar and air defense lapses. How were the hijacked planes able to penetrate U.S. airspace undetected or unchallenged by the military? Official investigations highlighted serious failures in communication and coordination among intelligence and defense agencies. But some continue to question how such lapses were possible. The Pentagon attack. How did an airliner manage to strike the Pentagon, one of the most secure buildings in the world? The lack of timely military response has raised questions about whether there were gaps in security protocols, as well as why existing defense systems failed to intercept the aircraft. Political motivations and consequences. Impact on Bush's presidency. After 9/11, President George W. Bush's approval ratings soared, and he successfully garnered support for the war on terror. Critics argue that the administration exploited the tragedy for political gain, leading to the Iraq invasion despite lacking evidence of WMDs. The Iraq War decision. How much did the 9/11 attacks play into the decision to invade Iraq? Even though Iraq was not directly linked to the attacks, many argue that the Bush administration used 9/11 as a pretext for a broader strategy in the Middle East, which continues to impact global politics today. Bin Laden and CIA involvement during the Soviet-Afghan War. U.S. role in Bin Laden's rise. During the 1980s, the U.S. supported Afghan fighters, the Mujahideen, against the Soviet Union, some of whom had links to Bin Laden's network, while the CIA directly funded Afghan groups. Any possible connections with Bin Laden himself have not been fully clarified or acknowledged, leaving questions about the extent of the U.S. role in his rise to prominence. Justification for war in Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction. WMDs. Why did the US and UK governments insist on the existence of WMDs in Iraq when no such weapons were found? This led to significant loss of life and raised questions about the motivations behind the invasion. Tony Blair's apology. Blair's acknowledgement that the justification for the Iraq War was flawed has led to discussions about accountability and the ethical implications of political alliances in military actions. Impact of U.S. military actions. Civilian casualties. Why were the strategies employed in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Pakistan so lethal to civilians? The extensive use of drone strikes and military operations has resulted in significant civilian casualties, raising questions about the moral implications and effectiveness of these actions. Displacement and radicalization. How did U.S. military operations contribute to the displacement of millions and the rise of extremist groups in the region? The impact of prolonged conflict has led to debates on how it fueled further violence and instability. Guantanamo Bay and detention policies. Legal and ethical concerns. Are the detention and treatment of individuals at Guantanamo Bay justifiable under international law? Questions about due process, torture allegations, and the indefinite detention of prisoners continue to provoke debate. Trials and accountability. Why have so many detainees been held for years without formal charges? The delay in legal proceedings and the lack of transparency in military commissions have raised concerns about justice and human rights. Role of foreign governments. Pakistan's complicity. Why did Pakistan allow the US to conduct operations on its soil? Questions remain about the relationship between the US and Pakistan, particularly regarding military support and the capture of terror suspects. Casualties in Waziristan. The death toll in regions like Waziristan, where operations were conducted against alleged militants, raises concerns about the impact on local populations and the prioritization of military objectives over civilian lives. Long-term consequences of military action. Withdrawal from Afghanistan. Why did the US ultimately withdraw from Afghanistan after nearly 2 decades? Discussions continue about the effectiveness of the US strategy and the implications for Afghan stability and governance post-withdrawal. Resilience of extremism. How has the US response to 9/11 influenced the landscape of global terrorism? The persistence of extremist groups and the emergence of new ones have led to questions about the long-term effectiveness of counterterrorism strategies, the complexities surrounding 9/11, the subsequent military actions, and the establishment of Guantanamo Bay raise numerous ethical, political, and humanitarian questions that remain relevant today. Debates about accountability, the efficacy of military interventions, and the long-term impact on global security continue to evolve as new information and perspectives emerge. Many of these unanswered questions persist due to incomplete information, political motivations, and public distrust. The 9/11 attacks and their aftermath have left a legacy of conspiracy theories and skepticism about the US government's role, actions, and transparency, underscoring the need for clearer public explanations and thorough documentation of events. As the discussions continue about closing the facility and reforming the systems of detention and trial, the hope remains that the stories of those held at Guantanamo will not be forgotten. They represent a pivotal moment in history, a moment that demands reflection, accountability, and a commitment to justice that transcends fear and retribution. Guantanamo Bay remains a focal point of debate regarding human rights, due process, and the US government's approach to counterterrorism. While some detainees have been released, the facility still operates, with ongoing legal challenges and discussions about its future. This narrative includes details about the history, purpose, legal implications, and personal stories related to Guantanamo Bay, directly addressing your initial questions while expanding on the complexities of the issue. If there are specific areas you'd like to delve deeper into or additional topics you want covered, feel free to let me know.